Thanks, Oscar. The team that makes My God is passionate about telling stories. We tell our stories by creating an environment each week that enables my guest to tell theirs. Not all of them know they're telling stories. Some of them think they're being interviewed. But really, all this paraphernalia is just about creating a safe place so they can tell us how they've become who they are. My guest today does know he's a storyteller. It's his passion too. And he tells stories for a reason. John Sinclair wants to make a difference, to make things better, to change the world. And the remarkable thing is that, one way or another, John's stories have been successful. His storytelling first came to public notice when he started to review movies on television. In those days, he worked as a video editor for news and current affairs.
I just enjoyed going to the movies, and then one day an opportunity came up at work for a spot in our news bulletin on a Saturday, and I had the idea of a review segment and sort of put together a little piece for the boss to have a look at, and he said he liked it, and most surprisingly he'd like me to present it,
right,
which was a little bit out of the blue.
Last year, the crowds were gathered here outside the Embassy Theatre in Wellington to celebrate the New Zealand premiere of the first Rings movie, The Fellowship of the Ring.
You enjoyed working in television?
I really enjoyed it. I got to work with some great people, and I got to do some fun things. And I got to tell some interesting stories. Yeah.
You tell me about telling stories. Is that why the fascination with telling stories?
You're in trouble if you don't enjoy telling stories when you're working in television. And so, yeah, it's just interesting learning about people and then getting to construct their story. I mean, an editor's job is to make everyone else look good.
Right.
You know?
But you're the real storyteller.
But it's a collaborative thing. I mean, actually, that's one of the things I love about television. It's a team.
But after a few years, you found yourself in India working with an organisation called freeset. How did that happen?
Well, interestingly, actually, being the young idealistic person that I was when I got into television because I wanted to change the world.
Of course.
As
television does that.
That's right, because it's such a powerful medium. And I know I'm not the only person that's felt that way. But yeah, there comes a point where doing news, you end up sort of telling the same story a bit over and over again in some respects. And I stumbled across this organisation called freeset, which was doing something which was really interesting. freeset is a business that's running in Calcutta that employs women who've been in the sex trade. Its sole reason for existing is to create employment for women who've been in the sex trade. Because in India, in Calcutta, once a woman is in the sex trade, basically she's got no way out. No one wants to know about her.
Trapped there forever. She's
trapped, that's right. And most of them get there because of poverty or they've been trafficked, and often the trafficking is a result of poverty as well. I mean, there's horrifically sad stories of girls who are sold by their mothers into the sex trade, which is still to this day is hard to comprehend. But it's a reflection of the poverty within which they live, and they're desperate. And so this business is employing these women. They make jute bags and now T-shirts as well, and they export them.
What motivates freeset to be doing that work?
They were really taken by what Jesus said about working with the poor and the disempowered and the people who are disadvantaged.
So let's be clear, there was Christian motivation for being there, but they're not there as any kind of evangelical thing. They're there to empower the women they're working with.
The business is there to give women a choice to leave the sex trade, for them to be free. So, yes, that Christianity informs that, but it's a business. Right. It's got to make a profit. It's about being sustainable and going beyond an aid model, beyond being a charity, to being a business that women can invest in terms of their own efforts and their own labours, and they can see the products that they've made being sold and people appreciating them and enjoying them and paying money for them so that they can eat, feed their families.
So the bags and the T-shirts and things are sold, they're exported or they're sold?
They're all exported,
right.
Yep.
They come to New Zealand?
They come to New Zealand, States, UK.
Where do you buy them in New Zealand?
Well, you can buy them online. It's the easiest place to
website,
Yep, website.
Where does the name freeset come from?
Well, if you swap the words around, you get set free.
Oh, see, I hadn't done that. Good.
Yeah.
What lured you there?
Well, I met Kerry at an Easter camp, where he was speaking, I was doing video stuff.
You can find children on the street, alone, dead.
He talked a little bit about freeset, and I got to talk to him after one of the sessions that he'd spoken in, and he told me a little bit more about freeset. Now, I didn't realise at that stage that it was only 6 months old, and it piqued my interest, and I just threw out the idea of coming across and making a promotional video for freeset because, you know, that was a skill set that I could offer. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to go all that way just to make a 3-minute promotional video, that seems like a long way to go. Why don't I make a documentary? And so I proposed this. I said, well, you know, would you be interested in doing a documentary? And he said yes.
More than 12 million people crowd the busy, chaotic streets of Calcutta, a place that's culturally rich, but teeming with the desperately poor. And it was fighting poverty that brought Kiwi family the Hiltons here 7 years ago.
To be perfectly honest, I feel like the smartest thing I did on that documentary was choose that story, because the freeset story is, in of itself, very compelling. And so whatever my shortcomings were as a storyteller, we're somewhat overcome by the fact that the story itself just keeps shining through.
Her attempts to escape the industry met with little success, until she found freeset.
রাস্তা দেখিয়েছে, সঠিক রাস্তা দেখিয়েছে যে তোমরা এইখানেতে মুক্তি পাবে, এইখানেতে কাজ করে নিজেদের সংসার পরিবার সব খুশি থাকবে, হাসি থাকবে, ঝামেলা অশান্তি নেই, মারামারি নেই।
And I thought, you know, it's great telling the story, and it's a good story, and it needs to be told. But I don't just want to be a spectator.
Okay.
I want to be a participant.
Right.
And that was the genesis of my desire to go back.
That kind of Christian motivation behind the Hiltons' work, as a child growing up, you're no stranger to the whole Christian identification.
Yeah, my family comes from a very strong Christian tradition, going back a long way actually. Both my mother and my father were very strong, devoted Christians, and that was a really important part of my life, and it was something that I embraced.
It was okay to be identified as a Christian. It wasn't a strange thing.
I don't think being a Christian's ever been cool. Even back then, you know. But it wasn't unusual.
Your life changed quite radically when you were 14. Tell us about what happened.
Well, yeah, when I was 14, my father didn't come home from work one day. He was a farmer, obviously, and he just dropped dead on the farm. He had a heart attack, and we got home from school, and my poor mother had only discovered him at about 2:45, and we'd come home from school, and so she'd sort of been rushing around trying to organise a few things and be home before we did, which she didn't quite achieve, and she had to tell us that Dad had died.
Right.
And
I mean, obviously devastating for you, overwhelming for your mother.
Yes, my poor mother ended with 4 nearly teenage kids, and she was suddenly flying solo and had a farm. Yeah, it was a really, really tough time.
Did your father's death affect your faith at all?
Well, I'm not sure if it did. I mean, I remember going and visiting him when he was in his casket after he died, which for me was a really important part of the grieving process, was being able to see him there. I so wanted to put my hand on him and pray that he would come back to life, because I really wanted my dad back. You know, I loved him, and he was a great dad, and I didn't want him to be gone at nearly, 52, nearly 53. But I didn't, because I knew that if I did that, it wouldn't happen. So I wasn't going to set myself up for disappointment of praying. And
Because it somehow would have been dishonest or unrealistic.
unrealistic and probably pointless.
Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord.
How did your life change?
Well, it changed quite dramatically, quite quickly, because it was very apparent that we weren't going to stay on the farm. Mum wasn't a farm girl, and none of us wanted to be farmers, so there wasn't a case of hanging onto the farm so that one of us could take it over. And so within, I think it was 5 months to the day actually, after Dad had died, we'd packed up and moved to Christchurch.
So you moved to Christchurch and the country boy became a city boy. Went to school there, where it was still probably not desperately cool to be a Christian.
No, I guess not, but that didn't really bother me.
Right.
I was a leader at the ISCF group, the Interschool Christian Fellowship group, and so I organised Bible studies and things for that, and I managed to work Christianity into school projects. You know, the English literature assignment, you do a literature review. Well, I reviewed Christian novels.
Oh, right.
You know, even the statistics assignment, I managed to somehow get the Christian angle and go figure. Maths, it takes some work.
Some people would call you obsessive.
Maybe. I mean, I was enthusiastic, I guess dogmatic, and I was probably a very annoying Christian.
Right. By the time you're finishing school, all of a sudden you had an interest in going to India. How did that come about?
Well, we had a bunch of people come travelling around the churches telling us about this short-term missions trip that they'd been on to India, and they were very excited about it, enthusiastic about this experience they'd had, and well, it looked jolly interesting. And Mum said to me, "So why don't you go?" I was like, "Me? What do you mean? Well, that's the sort of thing other people do."
Right.
And so she said, "Well, yeah, why don't you? If you're really interested in it, why don't you apply and see whether you can go?" And so I thought, okay, maybe that's a good idea.
What was a short-term mission program for whoever was running this?
You have the puppet shows and the singing and the dancing and the dramas. Someone would get up and preach.
And then there's some kind of invitation to be part of the Christian community.
Yes.
Following on.
I mean, you could probably argue that everything that we did was preaching. And to be fair, actually, some of those things which sound a bit like naff, I guess, to us here in New Zealand, actually play quite well in the Indian context. Actually, people over there do love it. But, you know, I mean, Hinduism is a polytheistic religion where there are millions of gods, literally. And here we are coming talking about Jesus and saying, you know, do you want to accept him as your personal saviour, da-da-da-da. And I kind of thought, well, in some levels, probably not that hard for them to say, he sounds like a good dude, I'll add him to the shelf. You know?
Okay.
And I didn't think we could have nailed that, because I don't think anyone really preached about, you know, if people wanted to accept Christianity, that he was the one.
You had to put all the other ones aside.
You had to clean out the shelf. And so there were a few things like that which I guess I struggled with, and I think it made us feel good. I think short-term missions trips on many levels are great, but not for the reasons that most people often, I think, go on them.
Right.
It's not really about what we go there to give to the people that we're going to see. It's about what we take away from the experience of engaging in another culture and of seeing other people, how they live their lives.
What do you think the Indian people that you engaged with actually made of you?
Well, we did a lot of churches, and so they loved us.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you know, you could turn up 2 hours late to a church and they'll still be there waiting for you.
Wow.
That was an eye-opener. So that's commitment. You won't find that in New Zealand. They'll be like, oh, everyone's gone home. Yeah, I really don't know what they made of us. But yeah, actually for me, it was the beginning of asking some very deep questions about my faith, let alone about how we were imparting potential faith to others. And I wondered about what a personal relationship with Jesus looked like, which is bandied about a lot in Christian circles.
Almost a Christian cliche, isn't it?
It is a Christian cliche, yes. You have a personal relationship with Jesus. And I started to think, I like the sound of this, but I couldn't honestly say that I felt like I had that.
Why do you think this began to trouble you now rather than, 6 months earlier as a suburban Christchurch boy?
I don't know. I mean, one of the things that, for me, I was confronted in India was with poverty and all those
sorts of things, which affected me deeply. That was, for me, actually the really important takeaway from the trip, was my basic assumptions that I make about life are not the same as everyone else on the planet. And I had my eyes opened in that experience, and I'm so grateful for that. I mean, it changed my life. And at the same time, it was kind of the beginning of the end of me and the church and Christianity. I started to wonder about the authenticity of my faith. As I say, I don't doubt for a moment that I believe stuff, but this whole thing about the personal relationship, what did it look like? Because I felt like when I prayed, it was like I'm talking to a brick wall. If Jesus was real and he was engaging in people's lives, and he talks about all of this change and he talks about transformation, this is the stuff I love. And there are some Christian people that I know who do embody that, who do live wonderful lives, and they are very giving, and they are exemplary, and I think that they, if you like, follow the example of Christ very well. But I'd have to say that the large majority of Christians didn't seem to embody a lot of that transformation. Now, I know in saying this that nobody's perfect. Speaking from personal experience, I know I'm not. I'm full of flaws, and the whole cliche, if I joined the perfect church, then it wouldn't be perfect anymore. That's a fair enough thing to say, because we're all imperfect, and you don't suddenly stop being a human with flaws just because you become a Christian. Well, I guess it was about 3 years from that trip to India when I closed the door. I mean, I hung in there, kept going to church and hoping that something would inspire me from the pulpit, which was probably wishful thinking. And it didn't, but I was reluctant to stop going to church, because I think I knew that if I stopped going, I probably wouldn't go back, because I didn't actually enjoy it that much. Sleeping on Sunday mornings, much more appealing than trying not to go to sleep during a church service on Sunday morning.
How would you describe yourself then, once you'd let it go? You'd ceased to be a Christian and had become...
A person.
A person. Really?
Without a religious label.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to put those labels on, I guess I would probably fall into the agnostic kind of category. Okay. I'm not an atheist. That raises too many questions for me. That's more questions than it answers. And so I guess for me, what I did was I embraced the situation of saying, hey, there's a whole lot of questions out there that I don't have the first clue what the answers are. And I'm just going to have to live with that.
Meanwhile, you came back from India and you had to forge a career of some kind.
I started doing an engineering degree.
Right.
And I got sufficient good grades that I could have been an engineer should I have wanted to. But I had decided that I really did not want to do that. And I'd always had an interest in television. From being quite young, we got a video camera. Thankfully, the year before my father died, so we actually managed to get a bit of footage of him, which was lovely. And so I often found myself daydreaming about making things in a televisual kind of a way. And
becoming a storyteller.
Yeah, becoming a storyteller. And so I heard about the broadcasting school in Christchurch and decided to apply. It was a great course. I loved it. And they were really interesting people that I was learning alongside, and we were all very different and come from different places, and got to do some really interesting stuff. So
you graduated and went into the hard world of employment.
That's right. I went and worked at a place called the Christian Resource Centre, and they were an outfit in Christchurch who make Christian media stuff, and I got thrown into producing a TV show called Full On Sunday, which was actually condensing church services. 25 minutes of magical television.
I'm going to take your word for that.
And so I'm working at this Christian organisation where every morning there's a Bible study.
Right, so there's a Christian ethos permeating the place.
That's right, and I was expected to lead one of these every week. And I was like going, that's...
Wee sense of compromise?
But I did actually talk to the guy who was in charge and said, look, I'm feeling a bit conflicted here. I'm going through all these big questions and I'm struggling with this. And he was really good about it. He said, look, he says, I'm okay with that.
And then you got involved with the Easter camp movement.
The Easter camp thing came directly as a result of being at CRC.
Right. And that felt good?
It did, actually, because what was interesting about it was that as I stopped going to church, I basically cut myself off from my social scene.
Right.
And sort of what happened over a few years was that these people that I met through Easter camp became the new core of my group of friends.
Right. And were some of them doubters?
I guess. I wouldn't say they were doubters in the same sense as me. They were people who would ask hard questions, who weren't afraid of asking questions that some people would be afraid of asking in the church.
Okay, yeah. Are any of those kind of doubting Christians still friends today?
Yeah, absolutely. We're good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we have great conversations, you know. There's a group of them that have set up a cafe, the Addington Coffee Co-op, and it's a great little hub of social interaction. These friends are people who have shared similar parts of the journey in terms of some of the stuff with Free Set. A lot of them have actually visited.
Okay.
And they have developed their own passion for it and are supporting Free Set in New Zealand now, selling Free Set stuff. But also they are doing a community kind of thing which has similarities to what Free Set's doing as well, with working with people who struggle in life. And so they were able to employ some people in there who otherwise would struggle to get work. And they take people into their homes who are having a hard time of life as well.
He related well to kids and they to him. So it was a very natural progression for Rob to have a family.
While you're back here in New Zealand, you're making another little documentary about your father. Tell me why you're doing that.
Well, it's just on 20 years since he died, which means it's well over half of my life. For me, the documentary about Dad it's about capturing some of who he was. Because I was only 14 when he died. I never got a chance to have an adult conversation with him. I never got to engage with him in those ways. And there's so many stories that I never got to hear from him. And I'm a storyteller. You know, I want to capture that and preserve it for my family, for my siblings, but also for if I ever get around to having my own children, and for my nephews and nieces, so that their grandfather isn't just a photograph. It's been really great. It's like getting to know my dad all over again, and going, oh yeah, I know where I got that from.
Discovering things about him that you would never otherwise have known. Probably.
That's right. I'm sure we've got a few stories that he probably wouldn't have told us.
Nothing quite like the help was being.
So your mother and your siblings, how do they feel about you doing this? They're pretty excited?
I think so, yeah. There's been a few rough moments. Yeah. Where it's been hard and reliving some things. But it's also been quite fun seeing my mum not quite fall in love with my dad all over again, but remember, relive that love, which has been sad too, because that means that brings back the memories and then the missing, you know. So that's been great. The national party thing.
Do you remember where this is?
Somewhere on the west coast.
Oh, these ones, I love those ones. There's Bike.
When we talk about your shift from confident faith to where you are now, are there some remnants of that faith stay with you? I mean, do you still have a positive attitude towards some of what the church has been on about?
I call myself now a sympathiser.
A church sympathiser?
No, not so much a church sympathiser, but a sympathiser to that which Jesus spoke about. I mean, he said great stuff. Right. I mean, his concern for the poor and for looking out for people and for that kind of stuff, his social justice message resonates with me very strongly. So
less a church sympathiser and more a Jesus sympathiser?
Absolutely, yeah, Jesus sympathiser. And, yeah, Jesus sympathiser. I can totally accept that he lived 2,000 years ago, that he said a lot of stuff that upset a lot of people and that they killed him for it. Right. What happens next? That's part of
its own question. So Jesus sympathiser without the kind of supernatural overtones.
Yeah. And he said lots of stuff which still resonates today. basically, love each other, help each other out. Addictions and a lack of self-confidence are common problems. They take time to work through. I got to the point in my TV career where, I love what I was doing and the movie reviews were great, but I wasn't changing the world. So I talked to Kerry and said, look, I'm really interested in coming back to be a part of what you're doing, to work with you. How would you feel about that? Great. So I didn't have any trouble convincing him. It was a no-brainer.
Right.
It was really easy just to say.
Here was something that was really going to make a difference.
Yeah. I was passionate about it. But to be honest, I'm really under no illusions that my going to Free Set is also about Free Set offering me a lot. The sense of community. It seems crazy, and on a rational level, actually, it doesn't make any sense. But I feel at home in that environment. It's completely foreign, and yet I feel at home there. Namaskar, welcome to my world. These people here are from the local community just outside the place where I'm staying. It's North Calcutta, it's the poorer, older end of the city. Them allowing me to be a part of their lives, letting me into that, is something that I can't explain and I love dearly. The front of the building where I'm staying is used as a public urinal. It stinks. It's easy to romanticise poverty, and I don't want to fall into that trap because poverty is awful. And there are some things about it where community can be a great thing because they're forced to work together. There are downsides to the community as well. They're living in each other's back pockets. They don't have any space. They get crabby with each other, and sometimes they get violent. But there are also great things, and there's so much that I know there's so much I can learn from them. My heart has been well and truly grasped by the people that I know in India, in Calcutta at Free Set.
You love India? I love India.
I'll be honest, I think India is probably one of the single greatest things that's ever happened to me. It opened my eyes, as I say, to a whole world that I didn't realise existed. I mean, there's a responsibility that comes with that. People either love India or they hate it. There aren't too many people in the middle ground, and it's under my skin.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.